Visit Avery.com, Avary, for the most up-to-date news and information on Team Avery.
Avery, 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 Avery.
The Video Archives podcast with Quentin Tarantino and Roger Avery is back for season 2. Head on over to patreon.com/videoarchives to get ad-free exclusive content and bonus episodes. This is the Gala Show. I'm your reporter on the beat, Gala Avery. On this episode, if you follow the festival circuit, you will remember when my guest movie premiered at South by Southwest. She's the writer-director of The Surrender, where a mother-daughter strained relationship is put to the test when the family's patriarch passes away. If that wouldn't be stressful enough on a family, the mother hires a mysterious man to resurrect her husband, thus bringing both she and her daughter straight to hell. Today on the mic, I have filmmaker Julia Max. Hey, Julia.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I know, and thank you for having me back. I've technically been here before when I interviewed Ian McDonald, so I'm just like really jazzed to be back. I love the furniture in your house. I love the view. I love the squirrels. I love everything about it. And actually, when I interviewed Ian, you were editing The Surrender.
I sure was.
And so
yes, and I was so concerned that the screaming coming from my office was going to ruin your sound. So I'm really thrilled that was not the case.
It was not. No. And I remember when I met you, I was like, I can't wait for her movie. I can't wait to see whatever she's editing. And now it's like I've come full circle here and I'm back to talk to you. So I'm super jazzed. So before I bring up the topic for today, I have a question for you. Mm-hmm. What was the movie that got you interested in being a filmmaker?
Oh, man, that's a good question. I think probably the first movie that I saw that I really loved so much and I was like, oh, I've got to be in film was The Red Shoes. It was able to capture so much visually, and it was also like so emotional and heartfelt, and this choice between like love and art, and it so resonated with me on so many levels, and I found it so inspiring, and I so desperately wanted to be able to create something like that.
Do you remember the first time you saw it? Or is it kind of just like this amalgamation of like when you think of movies, you think of that?
I was about 6.
Oh, really? So it was like a formative experience.
Yes. I mean, have you seen the film? It's incredible.
Did you have parents that like introduced you to movies, or was it just kind of like by happenstance?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in LA, so both of my parents.
Are you from here?
Yeah. Born and raised.
St. John's or
I went to
Sinai?
I went to Marlboro.
No, I'm talking about your hospital.
You're really going back. Santa Monica. Yeah.
So, okay, you and I are both St. John's.
Oh.
Yeah, and McGarris as well.
Oh, my gosh.
I think. Maybe I'm wrong. But, you know.
There are so few of us.
I know.
This is so rare.
I know. So we're here on the mic together. I found another St. John's.
Wait, where did you go to high school? Can I ask that?
No, you can ask. No, I didn't go to high school here in Los Angeles. So I moved up to Ojai with my family because I was a child. We moved up to Ojai and I homeschooled and I worked with my dad starting at like 14 or 15.
Oh, that is so cool.
it was an amazing experience. So yeah, that's why I never ask high school. I always ask hospital because I'm like, I can relate to that. But so you grew up here in LA.
That's
so
amazing.
You were around movies.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had a very weird family. I technically had 3 parents growing up, but yeah, all of them were in the film industry. And so it was very much like early age, like this is obviously what I want to be a part of.
So you knew from that moment.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Now, as always, my guest gets to bring their topic to the mic. So, Julia, why don't you tell us what your topic is and why you decided to choose it?
Well, my topic, I wanted to talk about my favorite horror films directed by women. And the reason for that is really kind of twofold. I feel like so frequently in this industry, filmmakers are asked to talk about their inspirations. We're asked to talk about different references for pitches and, you know, pulling together lookbooks for projects that we're working on. And I feel like there is this trend where you have to kind of reference the great masters of cinema. And usually it's like the more obscure, the better. It proves that you're a cinephile or something. And I find that really frustrating because it perpetuates that narrative that great filmmakers are men, because there weren't a lot of female filmmakers for quite a while there. And we are, just clawing our way back into the fold still. So I think it's really important to be able to normalize focusing on our contemporary, like our peers, filmmakers that are creating brilliant work today. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that we get inspiration from what's surrounding us right now. I don't, it just feels a little pretentious to be like, oh, well, it has to be from like, over 60 years ago. Otherwise like, you're not a real filmmaker and you don't really understand
Go back
cinema.
to school, go back to the books.
Yeah, and so I think there are not enough genre female filmmakers out there, but there are some pretty darn incredible ones. And so I just wanted to focus on some of the ones that I love so deeply and that have been such an inspiration for me.
But before we get into the topic, it's time for a commercial break. Back by popular demand, the Video Archives merch store is up and running. Get your favorite t-shirts, hats, notebooks, stickers, and more at videoarchivesmerch.com. You know me. I write all my notes in the Notes on Cinema notebook, the Gala edition, of course. Check out videoarchivesmerch.com to get yours today. Hey, thanks so much for being a loyal listener. If you want to keep up with me off mic, make sure to follow me on Instagram at Gala Avery. And we're back.
I'm calling a lot of these horror films, but technically, like,
Yeah,
some of them
list,
are debatable.
Some of them are debatable also, but I think we'll get into that. So I'm going to call it, let's call it, the topic for today is horror films directed by women. Yeah. I have 30 minutes on the clock and our time starts now. One of the things was when I was going through a list of like horror movies made by women, I was surprised because I love horror, but I haven't seen a lot of these ones made by women. There were quite a few, but I'm interested to know what's on your list.
Yeah, well, I mean, so many. I'm going to start with one. I mean, there is the very obvious, brilliant one that we all know and love, Babadook. Like, come on.
Yeah, the Babadook. I actually was surprised. I did not know it was directed by a woman.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and she's incredible. She's also done The Nightingale, The Murmuring. Did you see Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of
I have. So
Curiosities?
that's Jennifer Kent, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Jennifer Kent with the Babadook because that was
amazing.
and that was like a really formative horror movie when it came out.
Yeah. I mean, it's stylistically so beautiful. I love the way she's able to combine this kind of heightened style and reality, but make it feel grounded simultaneously with the emotions and with the actors' performances. Like, that is such an incredible film. And let's be honest, I feel like so many filmmakers have ripped her off, and we do not give her enough credit for that.
For sure. And again, as I mentioned, like I know of the Babadook. I've seen the Babadook. My friends talk about the Babadook. But why are we not talking about Jennifer Kent?
I know,
That's
right?
the thing.
It doesn't
It's
make
like,
sense to me.
We talk about the movie, we talk about the style, we talk about the look, the scariness of it, but we're not talking about the director, which is very unusual when it comes to movies. So I'm happy that we brought her up today because I learned something new.
Yeah, I love her so much. I have so much respect for her. I also feel like as a person, from what I've gleaned from interviews with her, she's not super showy, and I think she is very much like, let the work speak for itself.
And it does.
And it really does. It really, really does. I think she's such a phenomenal talent, and I'm so excited to see what she comes up with next. But she is one of the few filmmakers that if I hear she isn't involved with a project, I'm like, I've got to see that movie.
I'm excited then for what she's doing next. I'm wondering what it is.
I know.
Because there has to be something that she's doing. So
yeah. There was like a brief moment where Ian was like, "Oh, I might get to meet her," and I almost died of jealousy. And I was like, "What?"
Were you like, please take me with you?
Honestly, I was like, "Can I just like stand outside your door
Just,
and
like,
like
at the
listen
window?
in like a total creeper?" Because I love her.
What about the next movie on your list?
Okay, now this one is a bit.
Okay, we're getting into like horror. Is it horror? Is it not horror? Is it genre?
Oh, this one is definitely
Okay,
horror.
it's definitely horror.
I would be shocked if anyone tried to make the argument that this
Okay.
isn't horror. But I feel like this movie got such a bum rap when it came out, and I absolutely love it. Jennifer's Body.
Oh my God. I didn't know Jennifer's Body was directed by a woman.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
I mean, and
my mind is
it's-
blown because that wasn't even in the list.
right.
Jennifer's Body is so good, and it's like
Thank you.
and
It's amazing.
It's also like an amazing like I almost want to. It's definitely sapphic, but also at the same time not. Like it plays that line so well.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And the scene where she's lighting her tongue on fire is like burned into my memory. It's so good.
Yeah, there are so many wonderful visuals that stick with you long after the movie's over. And I think it is such a wonderful depiction of that kind of female friendship, which I don't know about you, but I have certainly had friendships like that before that were like way too codependent and not very healthy. And it's such a, I mean, granted, neither of us were possessed by anything demonic.
I hope
mind
not.
you. But, you know, it's, I think female relationships are so interesting. And I think the movie does such a wonderful job exploring that friendship and those kind of people without making it too heavy-handed the way it would if you just did like a straight drama, you know?
Yeah, and also the thing about a female friendship, and maybe this is why I've had male friendships mostly my entire life, women are very complicated.
Oh, so complicated.
And sometimes like they want to build you up and sometimes they want to completely obliterate you.
Yeah.
And you can't tell, but that's also part of a female friendship. Is like it's both of those sides.
I mean, honestly, it's deliciously complicated. And
That's what makes good for good horror though.
it really does. It's so ripe for horror. It's kind of watching that movie, I'm just like, how do we not see this more frequently in films? Like,
know.
it's great. I think it's such a fun exploration, and I do feel like that movie would have done better had it come out.
Now.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
it came out like even after Get Out, I think it would have done much better.
I know, I agree. It's interesting though because I think I saw it later. Like I don't think I saw it upon release. I can't remember what year it came out, but I don't think I saw it upon release. And then when I saw it, I was like, "What is this?" Like, it's saying everything that you kind of like the fear of a female relationship, and it's obvious that it's a female director then because it takes a woman to know how to depict that.
Yeah, I just think it's so wonderful and nuanced. But yeah, I think horror comedy is really difficult, and we go through kind of phases where like that's really popular and then it kind of loses popularity. And it's kind of a tightrope walk. Like,
because you also don't want it to be parody. Because like when
Exactly.
we think of like a horror comedy, okay, first like Scary Movie comes to mind, but then like the second one that would come to mind for me is like Tucker and Dale versus Evil, and those are or like Shaun of the Dead, like they're very more so comedy than horror. But I feel like Jennifer's Body is more horror than comedy.
yeah. And it is such an interesting one that audiences really do struggle to wrap their heads around at times. But I do think, Werewolves Within was another one.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
A horror comedy that I absolutely loved, and I think it should have done better than it did. But again, it's just such a tough line to walk with horror comedy because people always either want it to be funnier or they want it to be scarier, and it's really hard to strike that
And
balance.
also sometimes it's not funny yet, but in a few years it becomes funny.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it takes a little bit of time for it to gestate and to grow.
Absolutely.
I'm going to throw one out
Oh,
there.
please.
Okay, so I went through a little bit of a list, and I'm going to give you one that I'm not sure is horror, but people have
hear
brought
it.
this up as a horror movie, American Psycho.
Oh my God, I have that on my list
then
too.
let's talk about it.
Yes.
So American Psycho, because that's not just a female director, but it's like a whole female team, essentially.
Yeah.
It's
Incredible
like
team.
Roberta Hanley, the producer's a woman. You have Mary Harron who directed it. It's a
She's
female
so
story.
wonderful.
And
Oh,
it's funny because you and I talked a little bit because my dad adapted Rules of Attraction, and they tried to get him to adapt American Psycho originally.
Really?
Yeah, and to direct it and stuff. And he said he couldn't do it because of the dog sequence in the book. There's like a very intense dog sequence, and he,
yeah.
as an animal lover, just said he couldn't do it. And then by the time he figured it out, it had moved on already. But he always says like the fact that it's an all-female team making this movie about the American Psycho, about a man, like the archetype, is just fascinating.
Yeah, and I think they did an absolutely brilliant job with it. I love that movie so much. But yeah, I feel like that is an interesting one. When you look it up, it's always called a thriller.
Yeah.
You know, it's not called a horror, and yet you literally have a guy running around
With an axe.
you know, like with his like little chainsaw. Like, I mean, it's crazy.
Well, also, it's like maybe because it's so much satire. Like we were talking about horror comedy, and because Brett is a satirical writer, like he's writing satire on America and like Americana, and maybe the satire instead of humor makes it into a thriller rather than a horror.
I mean,
I'd say it's a horror movie personally.
could be. I find it, honestly, I feel like so much of the time we call movies thrillers just to make them sound more prestigious.
You know what? I could agree with that because also, like, when you think of, is a thriller a subgenre of horror? Or is it its own thing? Like, Dressed to Kill is a
Right.
thriller. I don't know. It's like when I looked at this list, because I had a few on here, like, and I know, for example, that Near Dark, Catherine Bigelow, like, that is a horror movie because it is a genre vampire film. But would I think of Near Dark as a horror movie? I don't really know if I would. Like, if someone asked me, oh, like, female directed horror, I would not say Near Dark.
Yeah, well, this is what I find so fascinating about horror as a genre, is that there are so many different subgenres to that, and so you get this really wide range of film that feels so different. Like, I mean, there's also slow burn horror. Like, Saint Maud is one of my favorites. I
Yeah.
love that. But if you look at Saint Maud and compare that to American Psycho, I mean, I think hands down, all of us would be like, oh, American Psycho, that's the horror film. And
Yeah.
yet it's not actually labeled as such. And that's so fascinating to me.
I agree, especially because you also have to ask, like, what do people, like, what do they find scary?
Yeah.
Because some people might see a movie and it's like, I don't think that's scary at all. And like, I'm not afraid of that kind of stuff, and it's not a horror, so therefore it's a thriller.
Yeah. Or it's a psychological thriller.
Or it's a or a erotic thriller. It's
Right.
like they just layer it on there. But it's like when I was another movie that it was funny because I was thinking before I looked up a list, I was like, okay, what female directors make horror movies? And of course, like, you have The Substance, which came out this past year, and you have like Raw and Fresh and Titan and stuff. But then I started thinking, and I was thinking, what is like a movie that I felt really unsettled while watching? And I don't know if you've ever seen this movie. It's called The Ascent by Larissa Sheptiko. And it was made in the 1970s, and it's like a Soviet era film, and it's about a group of men that have to like basically like get through, like climb a mountain, and they're like escaping.
Oh, no.
But
I don't think I have seen this.
This movie, I would never consider it a horror film, but it's so scary. Like what they have to go through, and like, because it's Soviet era, it's a period piece that takes place during the war. And her husband, she passed away at an early age in a car accident, but her husband is the director of Come and See, which is like
wow.
one of the most like daunting movies that I still haven't watched because I just don't feel like it.
I know. To be honest, it's been on my list, but I keep putting it off because I'm like, I don't know if I'm in the mood for this right now.
I know, and I like when I think about it though, it's like she's not making a horror movie, but it is really horrific. And so I was thinking about that. I was like, is it a horror movie? Is it not? Like, I don't know. I can't figure it out.
Man, it is so hard to really narrow down what makes something a horror movie, because I think, I mean, my initial reaction is like, the blood and guts is what makes it horror.
The slasher,
you know. But to be honest,
demons,
there are so many horror movies that really don't have a lot of blood and guts. And then there are so many movies we don't consider to be horror that are filled. I mean, like, if you look at a lot of action movies and stuff,
yeah.
so many more people are dying in those, you know?
But they're nameless. We don't know who they are.
Yeah, exactly. And so that somehow makes it less scary. But I do think the psychological
aspect
for me, I think, is really what makes something scary.
Yeah. What's the next one on your list? I gotta ask.
Let's see. I mean, Raw was definitely on there, which you already called
let's
out.
talk about it though a little bit. Yeah, because it's Julia Ducournau. I think I said that right. My French is so not good.
My French is terrible, so you did a better job than I would.
But when we talk about her, though, because she's also made Titane, which I guess some people would consider a horror movie. I don't know if I would. It's more like I would go like erotic thriller.
Yeah, that feels a little bit more erotic thriller to me than horror. That, for some reason, that feels a little more horror adjacent.
Because it's, well, like, for example, if we're talking about Titane, I have to bring up Crash, like by Cronenberg, but like that's not a horror movie, even though there's a lot of like really weird things in it. It's a genre thriller.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, honestly, one of the other things on my list was A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, which is also
like, is it? I mean, it's a vampire movie,
right? And
so it
feels inherently like this should be a horror, and yet it's so stylized.
Like, just because a vampire is in something does not mean it is a horror movie. Look at Twilight.
Yeah.
And I mean, you could re-edit Twilight into a horror movie if you really wanted to. As a young girl who loves Twilight, like, you could. But like, just because a movie has genre aspects does not make it a horror movie. Like, again, Near Dark.
Yeah.
Just because there's vampires in it does not necessarily make it a horror movie. Or like Lost Boys. Like, just because it has the vampires does not make it. And
exactly.
A Girl Who Walks Home Alone at Night.
Well, and that's the thing. There's actually a lot of horror movies that I love that I would not actually say are scary.
Yeah.
You know, which is so funny because I feel like there is a bit of a prejudice against horror films. It's amazing to me, like, how many people just straight up are just like, oh, no, I can't do horror. And I'm always so curious about that. I'm just like, well, why? What is the resistance to it? And there's this assumption that it's like, oh, well, you know, horror is only really bloody, gory kind of slasher things. And I can't handle that. And I'm like, that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Well, I'm just going to go back to your movie, and I'll edit this part out, but just so you know, this episode will come out the day before your movie's release. I talked with Greg about it. But
awesome.
Going back to your movie, so I was watching it last night, and I started getting like kind of scared, like, honestly. Like, I was like in my house, and it was dark, and I texted my friend in the middle of the movie. I'm like, I'm kind of scared right now. Like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to go to sleep, but it wasn't even like at a scary part. It was like before like that kind of midway thing, and I started thinking like, I just feel kind of like uncomfortable and like a little creeped out right now. Like,
yeah,
but like, it wasn't like, oh, there's like someone stabbing or like this thing happening. And it's just like, there are mood tones that you can use in a movie that you don't have to be graphic, that can just make you feel unsettled. And those are typically the ones that stay with me.
Absolutely. I mean, it's funny, Ian and I talk about this all the time, how very frequently it's what you don't see is so much more unsettling and scary.
Your brain fills it in.
Exactly. And so it's just like, it was hilarious working on The Surrender with, you know, our DP, Kaylin Yatsko, and our editor, Sushila Love, both of them are just fantastic. We kept on telling ourselves, like, this movie isn't very gory. I mean, it's really not. You don't really see that much. And it wasn't until we really got to the end of the film. We got to the end of the film and we'd gone through color correction and we were really seeing it with all the sound and all its glory that we were like, yeah, that because you don't see it, it is far gorier than we were really like thinking about when we were making it. Because you know, when you're making this, you see all the strings, you see all the prosthetics, and you're like, oh, it's all fake. But together, that when you see it all put together, you're like, oh yeah, that is far more impactful than one would assume.
Well, also, if you've seen a visual before and then you see a character get pulled into the dark and you hear a scream and you hear munching and crunching and then you see blood, you're like, holy cow, I'm going to be thinking of that visual that I've seen before, even if it's in another movie or, God forbid, someone has seen something like that in real life, etc. It's like you're going to fill in the gaps with whatever is the scariest thing, because I also feel like when you go into a horror movie, you want to be scared.
Yeah.
You're allowing yourself that freedom to actually feel fear.
Well, I think, I feel like women struggle with this a lot in life. I know I certainly have moments where you do feel less safe in the world. Mm-hmm. And in those moments, it can be really scary to watch horror films because you're like, I'm already scared all the time. Why would I want to spend my free time?
I don't need to heighten my anxiety.
Yeah, exactly. And I do totally get that. But for me, at least, I found that it's actually really therapeutic to be able to watch something that scares you and makes you anxious, because you can come out the other side of it. And in a way, it feels like you've overcome that fear. Like when the pandemic started, I took such comfort in watching zombie films and apocalypse films.
Yeah, because we were kind of going through what felt like an apocalypse where you had to stay inside. My dad, I remember, because he's a big fan of The Stand, like the Stephen King book. And so when COVID happened, he was like, it's The Stand outside. And he was like, we have to like take all the precautions and do everything.
Yeah, totally.
And then when you start feeling alone, I can understand wanting to pop on a zombie movie because those characters are kind of going through something similar to what it felt like for us.
Yeah. And there's something, I don't know, there's something also very comforting in being like, okay, well, at least it's not quite that bad.
At least I'm not having to chop heads off when people are dead.
I'm like, this is bad, but it's not that bad.
It could be worse.
Exactly.
Honestly, it could be worse. One thing I wanted to bring up, because when I started going through just horror movies in general, I mean, we have the trope of the final girl.
Yeah.
But I find it interesting that a lot of horror movies are female leads also. It's not just female directors. And we have female directors directing female leads, which we have also in your movie. But I'm like curious, like horror is actually really female directed. Is it because like women are sometimes perceived as weaker, or like they have to overcome something, or like why do we have that trope of the final girl?
Man, that's a really good question. I mean, I think you are right that is kind of the perception of like, women are weaker and therefore are less likely to be able to overcome these things. So it's a much bigger challenge for them.
And it's also really fun watching a girl like seriously kick ass.
Yeah. But it is interesting because I feel like frequently horror, from people who are not actual horror fans, there is this negative stereotype where it's like, oh, horror is kind of like anti-women. Mm-hmm. And because it's like, oh, they just want to like show women's boobs and like then have them get slashed to pieces or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I get that criticism and critique, but if you actually watch a lot of horror films, you realize it's so much more than just that. Horror is the genre where it's like we do predominantly have female leads
and female stories and female fears
and strong female characters who are able to survive and overcome insane obstacles. You don't get that with any other genre.
No, you don't. And also what I like though is that it's not only just strong, it's complex.
Yes.
Like you have a lot of flawed women in horror movies that have to overcome their flaws in order to overcome the killer or the slasher or whoever's after them. And it's a really interesting thing because I think of all these famous franchises, like Halloween comes to mind.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's a female-led franchise. And
Absolutely.
Would Halloween have been as impactful if it was a man in that role?
Right. And I don't think it would be. I don't think it would be as impactful.
Or like Pearl and Maxine, and like, it's all female-led. It's fascinating to me.
Well, I mean, this is a bit debatable whether this is horror or sci-fi, but when you get into like Alien and Ripley, like, come on.
I know, exactly.
What a badass!
One of the most kick-ass women that like, I want to be her.
Holy shit, she's amazing.
No, I think about that though, because science fiction and horror, they kind of go hand in hand. Like when we have like Night of the Living Dead, like, okay, that is definitely horror, but it is also science fiction. It's
Yeah.
like we have this kind of intersection of like the science horror. That's why you normally see those kind of science fiction horror movies together, or like Reanimator.
Absolutely.
It's like,
Oh,
I
I
know,
love
I love
Reanimator.
Reanimator. I love everyone involved in Reanimator. I think it is an amazing movie. But again, it's like you have horror and science fiction, and these are the two genres that also allow us as a society to look at ourselves. Because whatever's happening in the horror movie is just a reflection of kind of what's happening in the time. Like whether it's an allegory for like Night of the Living Dead is like the Vietnam War, and then when you get further into it, there's consumerism and the rise of whatever. It's fascinating that like those are the genres that we can look at ourselves through
Yeah.
instead of like a serious drama. Like we're not.
I mean, honestly, this is why I find it surprising that there aren't more genre female filmmakers. Because it feels like horror is so ripe for that.
I agree, but like I'm gonna go back to something that you said kind of before we started taping, which was when you got to direct this movie, you got to be yourself, and
Yeah.
you didn't have to act so serious on set, and you were surrounded by a really great crew that fostered your ability to basically be like, this is who I am, and I'm just going to be myself, and I don't have to pretend to be serious. And I've heard other female directors say that, like, oh, when I first started directing, I had to wear the uniform. Like, I had to dress more like a man.
Yeah.
Or I had to be more serious because I have to prove myself. And I don't know, is that maybe why we don't have as many female genre directors? Are they trying to do a more serious movie to prove themselves?
I mean, I think that it's very easy for women to get pigeonholed in certain, like, oh, for a long time it was rom-coms. Like, oh, that's where you guys belong. And really, even kind of dismissing rom-coms, like, as less
Like,
than
as
regular.
it's a less than,
Yeah.
because it's a rom-com, because it's made for, oh, it's just a chick flick.
Exactly. It's very dismissive, and it's not taken as seriously. And so I think that women for a long time have been kind of forced into those roles of doing those kind of films. And there's an assumption that they wouldn't be as good. I mean, honestly, when I was just starting on The Surrender and pulling together our team, I had a couple people, I'm not going to say who, say to me, well, you might want to be careful about hiring too many women because it's supposed to be a scary movie. And so, you know, you do need that male perspective in there.
You know what's funny about that, though, is like a lot of male filmmakers that I know want to surround themselves with female teams. And a lot of them have all female teams.
Yeah.
Or like a lot of women on their teams, at least. And so, wow, and I understand wanting the male perspective in certain areas, but like, I wish they could see my face right now. I'm like trying to like put it all together. Like, why does...
I mean, honestly, I think what it boils down to is regardless of what genre it is, your movie is going to be stronger if you have a diverse team.
And also a team that you as a director believe in.
Yeah, exactly. A supportive group of people. And when I say diverse, that's not just men and women. That's, you know, let's open it up to getting all the different perspective, like different races, different, you know, non-binary, trans, like all of the more diverse voices and opinions you can get, the stronger the storytelling will be, because there are always going to be things that are overlooked. And if you have a more diverse team, it's more likely that someone is going to come at something from a slightly different perspective and go, oh, have you thought about this? You know, and so I do think representation behind the camera is just as important as representation in front of the camera.
One thing my dad always told me was that it doesn't matter where the good idea comes from. It just matters that you're there to hear it.
Yes.
And he always told me, like, it could come from, he always has a character, Jimmy the Busboy. It's like, it could come from Jimmy the Busboy, or it could come from the guy at craft service. It could come from your camera operator. It could come from the PA. It could come from your DP. And if someone has a good idea, it's like your job as the director to assimilate it and decide, like, is it what I want? Is it better than what I'm doing? And again, if you have different perspectives, both in front and behind the camera, you're going to be hearing different ideas.
Exactly.
And everyone has a different voice, a different upbringing, a different place that they've come from, a different thing that they've done that morning that has changed them into who they are in this very moment.
Well, and this is why I think it's so silly, this notion of, you know, the director needs to be protected and no one can talk to the director while you're filming and on set. Like, it's very important that there's, you know, this bubble around them. And I just, I so don't understand that. Because no, art is not created in a vacuum. You need other people to inspire you, to bring ideas. Everyone is going to bring some new element to it. And the idea that it's just like, oh, I'm creating this whole thing by myself in this tiny little bubble with no input is utterly ridiculous.
I think everyone has a different directing style, though. And some people, and I've talked about this before, some directors are dictators and some are collaborative. And I guess it also just boils down to the vision that you want and like what kind of story do you want to tell. And if you want to tell something that has input from others and collaborative, I think it's important then to have as many people with as many ideas as possible.
Yeah. I always think communication is incredibly important and collaboration is incredibly important. And of course, the nice thing about being a director is if someone suggests something that you don't like, you don't have to take that.
No, you can be like, nope.
You know? But I do think it's valuable to at least hear the suggestion and be like, oh, I hadn't thought that this might have this ripple effect here. And like, that's a really good catch.
Or also,
you know?
Why do they think that? Also is the other thing, because they could suggest something and it's like, okay, why? I don't like the idea, but why do they think that maybe there is another option that I haven't even considered yet? There's a third option.
Or maybe this is coming across in a way that I wasn't necessarily anticipating.
I wasn't ready to hear this or something, yeah.
Exactly. And so it's important. I think it's really valuable to get input from the rest of the team. And this is why I loved our team so much on The Surrender. We had such an incredible group of people, and every step of the way, everyone had such wonderful insights and ideas, and it just makes it a pleasure.
An absolute pleasure. But you know what? That's actually all the time that we have for today.
Oh my God,
I know.
30 minutes. What?
I know. It went by so fast. Julie, is there any final thought that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, go out and check out as much horror as you can. Like, there are so many different subgenres as we discussed, and put in the extra effort to try to see more female filmmakers, because there are some really wonderful ones out there, and I don't think they get the recognition they deserve.
And I think I'm going to button it with one other thing. I think also if you're a woman that's going through something, or that you're really afraid by something, or you feel really anxious from something, write it down into a story, because sometimes the best way to get through those fears is to write a horror story. I've done that before.
Oh, I love that.
My dad, one of the first things I had this like weird event that happened to me that wasn't like that bad. But my dad was like, oh, have you ever just like considered writing it into a script? And at 10 years old, he gave me final draft and he handed it to me and I wrote it into a script and I read it every now and then. And it's as if a 10-year-old wrote a script. But I'm like, you know what? Like that actually was like really therapeutic. And I didn't feel like so freaked out by those things anymore. And so, you know what? Thanks, Dad. But I think that's a great thing. We need more female horror.
Yes. And honestly, art is such a wonderful way of processing your feelings and what you're going through. Yeah, that is fantastic advice. I love that you said that. Thank you for saying that.
I felt it from you. I could tell. I was like... So that's it for today. Thank you so much to my guest, Julia Max, for coming on to the show. Make sure to check out The Surrender. Which will be coming out on May 23rd. I'm Gala Avery, and this has been The Gala Show. The Gala Show is brought to you by Avery.com. This episode was executive produced by Roger Avery and produced by Gala Avery. Music composed by Andy Milburn. Additional sound mixing by Eric Clapp. As always, I'm your host, Gala Avery. Copyright 2024, all rights reserved. Despite me sharing the same last name with this charity, I don't have any affiliation with it, besides the fact the issue is very near and dear to my heart. Did you know that in the United States, 2.7 million children currently have a parent in prison, and it's estimated that 10 million children have experienced parental incarceration at some point in their lives? I was one of these kids, and as an adult, I am really grateful to be able to give back to Project Avery. Their mission is to build leadership from within by supporting community through programs such as mentoring and outdoor education, and also to remove the stigma surrounding having a parent that's incarcerated. You don't have to feel alone. If you know a kid who could use these resources or would like to donate money or time to the charity, please go to Project Avery, that's AVARY.org, to check out what this amazing charity is all about. Again, that's projectavery.org. Thank you guys from the bottom of my heart.